Okay, this is a brief introduction and introductory overview to Football for Peace. Football for Peace, full name and is Football for Peace International, but for short, Football for Peace. Football for Peace is a project come NGO that is affiliated with the University of Brighton, mainly because the main active volunteer members that direct and run many of the programs and run many of the training camps in England are employees of the University of Brighton, and many of its volunteers are students from the University of Brighton, but in no way is it just a University of Brighton project. This is independent, and it is a project that basically started 20 years ago that attempts to address divided communities and promote coexistence through the use of sport. Now, when we say the use of sport, we do not mean holding football tournaments, training people to become better athletes. Rather, when we say coexistence through sport, what we're really talking about is sport at a grassroots level, more physical activity than sport. But using football, using something that's any sport, rugby, whatever it might be, that's familiar to the others, then becomes the attraction or the hook or the means by which we can promote and attempt to create environments and spaces through which coexistence can then begin to occur. On here, you can see the URL for the Football for Peace website. I strongly suggest you have a good look at that just to get a more detailed history and background and overview of what it is that we do and where we have worked over the past 2 decades. But in all of what we do then is basically we use a values-based methodology and education program. And we are explicit in the teaching of values. So we're not teaching sports skills, we are teaching, and we're not teaching social skills in and of themselves, we are teaching what underpins those things, which are a certain set of values. And we do this through the physical activity and through the use of sport. We don't do sport for sport's sake. Sport is simply a tool. It's a means to achieve alternate or other goals. So as I just sort of said earlier, we are not attempting to create better athletes. We're not attempting to create sporting infrastructure. We're not trying to create a sports club or anything that has anything to do with the formal structures or practices of sport. What we're attempting to do is use physical activity and games and sport to be involved, to basically help communities and the people in those communities develop more holistic skills and knowledge. Through the 20 years that Football for Peace has been working, we have developed a pedagogy and partnerships. Currently, we have worked over the years in 9 different countries around the world. And as of the start of the pandemic in the beginning of 2020, we have been working in 5 countries at that time. I've been active in 5 countries working with local partners. And all of our projects work with local partners at the request of those partners. These are grassroots projects then, not policy meetings or policy making, not any sort of office work or organizational development per se, but more person-to-person interactions around which certain kinds of values like trust can be built. So in these projects with local partners, we work on a variety of issues, right, that are prevalent or prominent in those particular communities. But overall, then, it's working towards the goal of simply reducing conflict. Now, conflict can mean many different things and can appear in many different ways. It's not necessarily the same thing as violence. So in reducing conflict, right, and work in those sorts of projects that we do then, these can be addressing a number of different questions. It might have to do with gender equity and women's empowerment. It might have something to do with a local community's environmental sustainability and the ability to have a say in what's happening in their, not just in their community, but in their surrounding region or area. And it might have something to do with violence prevention. Now, violence prevention might be something as simple as providing the tools for people to communicate so that when a disagreement occurs, violence is not resorted to resolve that particular disagreement. So it's everything from engaging with school children and teaching them ways to communicate their disagreements in which they aren't resorting to fisticuffs and physical violence with their hands and fists and weapons, to larger questions around violence that have to do with marginalized ethnic groups or marginalized religious groups that in some way then are separate from other aspects of society in which there's a great deal of power inequity as well. All of this then works towards the idea of peace building, and in particular peace building through education. And the education we're talking about here then is more of a reflective education that deals with values and how those values should be enacted. And then what we do to engage with that, sort of meet these goals and do these sorts of things then, is to provide professional training, in particular to sports coaches. Any sports coach, doesn't have to be a football coach at all. Despite our name of Football for Peace, we work with coaches and we have used a number of different sports as is deemed appropriate in the context in which we work. So we train coaches, we train educators, particularly physical education teachers, but could be other educators as well. We've trained social workers and basically any other role or person who in some way is working with these sorts of situations of inequity, of marginalization, of distrust, and so forth. That's the principal thing that we do. Through that work and through what has been deemed the effectiveness of our work, that has attracted the attention of various other bodies in the places that we work and in the UK as well, that has left us then also to working in a exemplary sort of advisory capacity. In other words, through our example, we talk about what we do to people who are involved in policy thing. And so we've worked with, in various countries, we've worked with national governing bodies of particular sports, especially football. We have worked with government ministries around the uses of sport for social development, for the reduction of conflict. And even in more recent times, we have, at their invitation, come to a United Nations meeting to discuss the role of sport for international development. These then are the kinds of things that Football for Peace does and how we go about it. Greater detail can be found on our website, and I hope you definitely enjoy the course.